Prior to the suspension, this honorable chamber was in standing finance committee. We revert to such.
Standing Finance Committee resumes with Head 46. We continue with the Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Madam Chair, I thank you for recognizing me.
Always, always.
Madam Chair, unfortunately, my friend like me suffers from the dominance of one part of his ministry over all of the rest of it. Because in the same way that people seem to think I'm the Minister of Water and Sewage and nothing else, I think he suffers from that slightly. So the couple of questions I have for the ministers, I'll just deal with the ones of personal impact for me first, and preface them by saying I believe the minister is doing a fantastic job in this innovative ministry in Barbados. It was important with what Barbados is going through as a country in the context of climate change, in the context of increased both in intensity and frequency hurricane season, a recognition of the fact that although we are 166 square miles, I think our economic zone extends 400 times that size, so we might be a small land area, but he can coin this phrase, we are a large ocean state. So I want to compliment him on the work that he's done. He's taken great pains and has achieved a lot in pushing the oceanographic resources and it being a part of Barbados to the forefront. There's still a lot more to be done, and it is a work in progress. And as a suggestion, before I get into the actual question, I think that the ministry could benefit from a bit more of a PR exercise in trying to explain to Barbados that our area of concern does not end with the 166 square miles on which we're gathering, but it extends to our whole ocean and sea space. So when we do the beach cleanups and you see what comes in to the shore from the sea, or if you go snorkeling and diving and you see the amount of plastics that get caught up in the reef, or sometimes when an animal dies, like when a turtle dies and they do the autopsy on a turtle, you see plastic or thing choked on a plastic bag. It would help us to understand that what we do inland finds its way into the sea, and equally what other people do finds its way to us, and what we do finds its way to others. So I would like to see from your ministry more of an awareness for children that the sea needs, and the sanctity of the sea needs to be preserved, not even just in the same way as we do on land with our basic sanitation, but even more so, because we are way more dependent on what is happening in our ocean than we are with what is happening on land. Having said that, I wish to ask the minister, I heard him talk about the development of the fishing industry and the fish markets and the need for haulage facilities, both for the fishing boats and both for the pleasure craft, especially where a disaster or a weather event is approaching Barbados. I did not hear him delve into specifics on it. And specifically, with Oistins being the largest fishing community on the island, and there being no haul-out facility, the fishermen in Oistins and the surrounding areas have to go all the way down to Bridgetown to get their boats hauled out. And then there's no storage there, so the boats get hauled out, and then they have to pay a good set of money to get the boats brought back up to Oistins, to the boatyard, on road transport. A haul-out point or haul-out facility or a hoist is critical to the continuation of Oistins as a fishing community and the fish market as an all-encompassing facility. So specifically, I would like to know what plans there are in relation to a haulage facility for Oistins.
Thank you, first of all, Minister, for your very kind words. And I take the point in relation to putting the message more out there about some of the things that we've been doing. It is a point that I've been making very strong in the ministry. The PS sitting next to me told me that this year we're going to be intensifying the PR, so I believe that will address some of the issues you just raised. In relation to Oistins, I mistook you for a second for the Honourable Member for Christchurch South because he constantly asks me about Oistins. In fact, we had a meeting at Fisheries Department in town with a significant representation from the fishermen from Oistins, and as well as the Member of Parliament for the area as well. And we spoke about some of the plans for Oistins. And I did say that Barbados currently has only Concept Bay properly as our haul-out facility, but that we're working now on doing one at, we're going to finish Concept Bay, we're going to do one through the port, and hopefully the port will speak to that. And maybe we're going to add, not a haul-out necessarily, but a proper pull-out at Pile Bay as well. But Oistins and Bridgetown definitely will need some attention. If we get the facility at the port up and running, it will address some of those concerns. But I know the people in Oistins have peculiar needs that they would wish addressed. The reality is, Minister, there was a crane. There was a crane or hoist that was bought for Oistins to be able to do that kind of work. It was bought by the last administration for a cost of about $750,000. That hoist was never used. The hoist was bought and it still sits now in the yard at Fisheries. And it was never used, and because it was never used, it is not functional in its current state. So that was $750,000 that was just pretty much wasted. It just sat there and was wasted. We have since engaged, and the Chief may speak to this, we've since engaged the manufacturers of the hoist. We're now going to be flying them, and I think they come this month. They should be coming into Barbados on Monday to go and take a look at the hoist to see if it can indeed still be used, because it hasn't worked for so long. We've been trying to coordinate a meeting with them now for a while, but we've finally been able to get them to concretely say they're coming on Monday. It took a while. But the truth is that crane, and the $750,000 that was spent on it and never used, is perhaps the biggest wastage in fisheries in Barbadian history. And it's not only because of the waste of funds, but also because of the fact that there are persons in Oistins who could have benefited from the use of the crane or the hoist. And it has never been used. So hopefully when the manufacturers come to Barbados, they tell us, they give us good news, which is that we are in a position to be able to use it. And if we are in a position to use it, then we will be able to deploy it as one of the sites. The other challenge with Oistins, though, was that to be able to do that effectively at Oistins, we were looking at one point, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch South is very familiar with this, and you will be too, Minister, but at one point we were looking at building 2 bridges almost, so that you would then drive out and lift the boats up. There were costs associated with that. The last proposal that we had from the private sector, in conjunction with the fisher folk, was a new device that would go into the water actually and be able to haul out as well, and there's a cost associated with that. So we're taking the cost of those things into consideration. I am almost now in a brief holding pattern. I just want to wait until the guy comes on Monday, until they evaluate the crane that was bought for $750,000 and sat down. And if they tell us that it is in a state that they could be able to repair it, then maybe we could do the necessary work at Oistins and apply it there, or apply the new technology. But I do know we're looking at a facility there. The fishermen in Bridgetown have also said they would like to be able to have a haul-out facility. We will not be able to do a haul-out facility at every single market. And the question is going to come, and I think I raised the question then, do we do one at Oistins or do we do one at Bridgetown? And it was just a general, a very healthy conversation that I had with the fishermen with a view to coming up to a conclusion that would allow every person involved to be happy. But I think you can see that we're looking at it. We have a proposal. We're going to finalize the proposal very soon, but a lot depends on what the manufacturers tell us on Monday. I think the Chief may wish to add.
Thank you, Minister. If I can just add to give some clarity to the circumstances with respect to the current crane or the boat lift that we have. The Fisheries Division has been proactive in terms of the need for getting equipment which is tailor-made for the lifting and hauling out of fishing vessels. And it started with the equipment, the 10-ton boat hoist at Concept Bay. Actually, we had visited the facilities at the Shallow Draft in terms of being run by Trevor Hassel at the time, or Eric Hassel, sorry. There were, for example, we needed to identify equipment which was tailor-made for the marine environment and for seacraft, including fishing vessels. And this is where we would have started the process of building out proper haul-out facilities with tailor-made equipment for the fishing industry. In terms of the equipment at Concept Bay, that uses a tractor in order to move to be attached to the hydraulic hoist. This second equipment that we purchased in mind for Oistins, in terms of a 50-ton capacity, self-propelled. And we had technical difficulties in terms of the decision, in terms of the build-out for the slipway at Oistins. We had 3 options provided to us. There were some reservations also initially through technical recommendations from Coastal, and we had it reviewed. So it is not as though we were not in a proactive manner in terms of providing the haul-up facilities at Oistins. So right now, we are waiting the review of the equipment, and we do have a fallback position in terms of whether or not, if the slipway options at Oistins are prohibitive or not within the resources currently, that the equipment can also be utilized at Concept Bay. Thank you.
Oistins. Subliminal messages. Madam Chair, through you, Minister, the Deepwater Harbor and the port was one of the most important developments, investments in Barbadian history. It is perhaps, if we had to rank the 3 most important, it'd be up there with the ABC Highway. Actually, it might even be number 1 in terms of vehicles for the advancement and development of Barbados as a commercial entity and for our tourism product. I don't know whether studies have been done as to the adequacy now of the entire facility, but with the increased traffic that we're getting from the mega cruise lines, with the potential for bigger and better ships and the development of that industry, with the normal cargo traffic, I want to know what are the plans for the expansion of the port to facilitate passenger traffic and also commercial developments, and even what are the considerations to allow Barbadian businesses into the port for commerce and to expand the duty-free sector inside the port. And there's a lot to ask about, but it is something that we need to address to answer questions for a number of Barbadians, and also the accommodation of taxis.
Thank you, Minister. Of course, the CEO, Mr. John Murray, will speak to the details of this. The vision that we have for Barbados in terms of cruise and cargo is that Barbados should become the #1 place of business. Barbados is poised to be the hub for all cargo activity and for major cruise ships as well. The facilities as currently exist do not allow us to realize those dreams. And the port has a new mission, part of it being to be the most green, most innovative shipping point in the Caribbean. And I think to be able to do that, we have to expand the facilities we offer at the port. We have to expand the service. If Barbados is to become more competitive, it is important that the port itself gets better at the business that it is in. And under the leadership of the chairman and the CEO in the last year, I think we've seen all the right signals being sent to suggest that we are serious about becoming the #1 place to do business. Barbados is ranked, I think, 132 out of 190 countries in terms of trade across borders. And a lot of that is related to the work that happens actually in the port, and in terms of our efficiency, our capacity to be able to turn over cargo and various things. I already expressed the view that we are separating cruise and cargo. I know the CEO will speak to that. Most of the cruise ships that are coming now are of such sizes that the current facilities cannot accommodate them, and we're discussing a northern berth as well, and we'll be able to do that when we properly separate cruise and cargo. We were looking at additional facilities as well for additional smaller vessels, like small yachts and so on, as well. So there are lots of plans in train for the port. The one that makes me most proud, and we don't talk about it, is that in our revision, in terms of, and the opposition leader had asked about the pollution from some of the ships. In our revision of the shipping legislation, we are looking at reducing the sulfur that is produced by a lot of these ships. And to do that, the port has to be in a position to be able to offer clean energy. We're working on that as well to become perhaps the first in the region to be able to offer the clean energy to the ships as the ships move toward becoming even more green themselves. So there are massive plans in place. The CEO now should speak to some of the details of some of the things that's happening in the port.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, good afternoon, members of the House. We will be the most innovative green maritime hub in the world by 2030. That's our vision. At present, we are revising the port master plan. We had one wrap-up session yesterday all day, and by the first month of the new financial year, we will have a new port master plan. That plan envisions right now as I identified, $1 billion of major capital works over the next 10 years, including, and not that we intend to expend $1 billion on our own, we intend to create new partnerships, a lot of PPPs, bring a number of private sector entities into play, create the structure at the port. We call it the second wave of corporatization, in which we will set up a number of companies. We intend to democratize the ownership interests, create structures that would enable Barbadians to invest in the port. So, for example, we were talking about having an enhanced marina at the Shallow Draft facility. Currently, we have a jetty there, which accommodates 30 catamarans and small craft. It is our intention to double the capacity, at least in that area, by a form of PPP, incorporate the careenage facilities there also, and create an entity that Barbadians could invest in and earn more revenue. There is a demand for that kind of facility in Barbados. The Port Master Plan and the planners have done their analysis, and they're looking at, there's an expectation that we should be able to move from 800,000 passengers that we manage today to around 2 million by the year 2030. So we've identified an area to the south of the existing port, we were going to build a new cruise facility in a phased manner, and would enable the separation of cargo from cruise. Currently, cruise passengers look into the operations in the belly of the port, look into the workshop and so on. By moving to the south and creating a new facility there, we will create that separation that we think is necessary for cargo and cruise. And so currently we are in discussions with major cruise lines who have shown an interest, who have an interest in investing in Barbados and in the port facilities. That's the Bridgetown cruise facility that we're looking at. That has targeted costs right now in the region of half that $1 billion I spoke of earlier. But we were trying to get that project reduced to around maybe $150 million US. We are also looking to build a cruise facility in the north of the country, in the Spikestone area. We would have had a town hall meeting. We invited expressions of interest. We have 6 entities submitted interest in that. Now we've had a town hall meeting to hear the views of all the stakeholders and all the others interested in this area. We will now issue requests for proposals to get detailed designs from these 6 entities. The intention is to be able to accommodate smaller cruise ships, bringing between 200 to 750 passengers, as well as super yachts. And we also want to have facilities for the fishing folk in the area. Despite Stung Jetty, as you know, has been dilapidated for some time. We've fixed it a number of times, but to no avail. Once the north swells come, it's damaged again. So we want to have a more comprehensive solution to ensure that we accommodate the fishing community also to the north of the country. In terms of safe harbor, we're looking to reclaim some area in the Bridgetown area again to be able to accommodate aggregate storage. As you are aware, the sand reserves of the country have been depleted, and there will be a need to have more sand and aggregate imported into the country. And once we start leasing out the area for the flour mill, as we've been doing for boat haul facility and natural gas facility and so on, we will not have any place to store aggregate, and which is boulders and so on being imported into the country. So we are looking to build an aggregate berth, and that will also serve as safe harbor for the fishing boats and so on in times of bad weather. Currently, we are also, Minister mentioned our ranking. We are currently doing a number of projects in the port. One with the Commonwealth Secretariat, looking at the logistics flows to ensure that we iron out any bottlenecks. We are also we have the technical note prepared. We're also working, hopefully, with the Caribbean Development Bank to come up with a port community system, which will basically link a number of systems across organizations so that there's better flow of information. We reduce the number of steps, the number of forms, and so on, and hence improve our ranking in terms of doing business at the port. So there's quite a bit happening at the port at present. I want to stay within your 2-minute rule, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, my final question is, Minister, I am tired of traveling and talking about renewable energy and going to renewable energy conferences and hearing people accepting a 2-degree temperature change as being acceptable. The reality is that if we do encounter a 2-degree temperature change globally, then most of our coastline is going to go with that. And it is important that your ministry, being the ministry that focuses on the blue economy, right, also lend its voice to this. I mean, this is a cross-cutting issue. This cuts across energy, it cuts across environment, but it also significantly cuts across your ministry as well. And when you talk about the oceans and you go forward, it is important that your position be that we are not expendable in the Caribbean. Let us not accept, you spoke about the 2-degree temperature change, is what I'm bringing up here. It is important that the message come from all quarters of Barbados that 2 degrees is not a foregone conclusion. 2 degrees is going to wipe out a lot of the assets that we currently hold and change the shape, the actual shape of Barbados, and that we are not expendable. So I am asking you to include in your plans for your ministry, when you're talking about the sea, right, to focus as well on how that change in global temperatures and change in the sea temperature is actually going to affect the business of maritime affairs and the blue economy, which is the core of your ministry.
Thank you, Minister. I give you the assurance that that has been my position from the start. We've all taken our cue from the Prime Minister, who takes her cue from the reality of things. The Prime Minister gave a speech invisible but not dispensable. And I think she made the case very strongly for small island developing states, not only for the Caribbean, not only for Barbados, but across the world. And I said before that I think this conversation about 1.5 or 2.5 rise in acceptable rise in temperature, I think that's the wrong conversation. I feel as if we should have said we are already there, we can take no more, and let the world then try to remedy itself. Because now developed countries are now talking about 3%. And there's a saying that right sometimes is a conversation for for people equal in power. and that when we speak, we're not heard the same way as when other people speak. And I think that begs for us the necessity for us to go to these meetings as one CARICOM, really, and to speak as one single voice and say, for us in the Caribbean, what is happening is not good enough. And to take, I mean, people come to us oftentimes because we have also, as individual nations, a vote. So they want us to vote in regard for certain things, but I think we should say, when we go to these things are very, very important for us. And, you know, when I travel, I make the point very clearly over and over again that you cannot treat the Caribbean countries with the kind of disregard that they've been treating the Caribbean countries. I think one of the positive things that have happened in the last year and a half for Barbados is that we have now re-engaged the world in a way that we hadn't in the last 10 years. I think the Prime Minister has led the charge in terms of her position and her stance, and she's become recognized. I know when you travel, you do it. I know the Minister of Tourism, who travels a lot, often do it, and I do it. Those of us who travel a lot, you know, echoing the cause for the Caribbean, we do it. Because it is really an existential issue for us. This is not a case where we could be flighty about it. This is really about life and death. For the people in the Caribbean, it is really about life and death for the Caribbean. So I think when we speak, we have to speak about it in a serious way. We saw the same thing happening to the Pacific Islands. You know, they have lost they've seen higher levels of sea level rise than we have. They're losing places that they knew as well. Again, we have to make the case, and I feel it is important for me to restate as I close that it is up to developed countries really to change their ways in a lot of these cases, and that we have to be the conscience of the world, and that when we speak as the conscience of the world, and if the collective conscience of the world has said, look, this is enough, then hopefully we can get a change in the behavior. But Minister, I take your point, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Before you go, Mr. Jean-Marie, I'm hearing you speaking about the plans the port has and everything, and they sound wonderful, but I am hearing buzzings and concerns among the Shipping Association of Barbados in terms of their usefulness going forward in the future, and in terms of their possibly not having contracts renewed. Can you enlighten me and dispel fears or with respect to that, one? And the other question would be in terms of the safety measures in the port. I'm also hearing with respect to unpacking some containers, how items are packed badly that could possibly pose a danger to staff. For instance, cars being suspended from the roofs of containers and so on. Those two concerns I have thus far.
Thank you for the question. With respect to the Shipping Association of Barbados, we have been working together for many, many years. They provide agency services to ships, as well as there are six stevedoring entities licensed to provide stevedoring services in Barbados. Life has changed, things have changed, and it has been determined by the board that those services should be provided and can be provided by the port. So it's not that the Shipping Association will have no role, it was just that will not be operating as a stevedore in Barbados, at the Barbados port. They will still be agents for the vessels. That's the current thinking. We renegotiated the contract, and there's a 3-year arrangement that is now in place that will come to an end by year 2022 or so. The port staff actually does the stevedoring works on board the vessels as it stands. The insurance arrangements are all in place, so it's not going to be any difficulty with the transition. We understand the challenge that they may have. The Prime Minister invited them to consider new businesses, new ways to operate within the port, and we're still awaiting that discussion so we can go forward.
Because the worry I am picking up is about, in terms of their employees, their member employees, that could be something like 300 after working from 81. I'm just expressing the fears that I'm hearing with respect to continuing the hiring of their staff. Because right now I know the port makes money from them. In other words, they pay for services of the staff of the port. They also add a 45% onto that to the port. So there are fears about their usefulness, and they're having to let go of staff So I just want to allay any fears that might be there.
But thank you, Madam Chair. The truth is, when we came into office, we said as a government that we were going to look at some of the contracts that were in place and try to renegotiate some of these contracts to the extent, because at the end of the day, there were areas of expenditure that we needed to lower, and then there were areas of potential revenue that we needed to increase as a government. And in reviewing some of these contracts across the board, but certainly in the port, there were areas where we felt that if the port itself took on some of these responsibilities, that the port could generate more revenue for the government. As it relates to the persons who may potentially be displaced, we've always felt that because as the port takes on the responsibility to, they're still going to need people to be able to do it. So some of these people would naturally be reabsorbed back into the work of the port. But I think the conversation has to be around what is the best fit now for the government, what's the best fit for the country. I think anyone looking on from a business point of view, because the port is, after all, a business, would want to see that the port is doing what it's doing at its most efficient. And I think what we've tried to do by giving the persons who are in the stevedoring business 3 years, because it wasn't that the port came in and ended it immediately. You have 3 years to start making the adjustments, start seeking other areas of potential revenue, finding other opportunities to partner with the very same government to be able to do other things as well. So while the nature of the business may shift, the amount of business that people may have may not even shift. In fact, people may get more. But it is important for the government, as you know, that we conduct ourselves as a business. So it was just a matter in that case of what would be the best fit going forward. Also, it was also a case where you want to be able to control the actual relationships with the persons who come into the port in terms of being more efficient and managing that relationship and increasing your efficiency. We feel we would be in a position to be as efficient or more than somebody else at a lower cost to the port. So that is all that was. But there was no ill intent toward the persons in the industry. But, you know, all of us have to find new ways in our various agencies to be able to operate in a way that would allow people to live. Because, you know, none of us want to send home anybody at the end of the day. But the same thing would apply if I were to tell you that we are taking a contract. For example, we're raising $15 from it. Then we could potentially take $30 from it. Then, you know, as a business person, you'd want to do what's in the best interest of the organization. So that is really what that was. But I must tell you that I think the port has done it in a way that is very considerate of the persons who've been traditionally offering that service.
All right, yes, sir.
And with respect to safety concerns, yes, we do have some persons who enter the port because the goods may not be safely stored in the containers. So we have to be careful when we are handling those such containers. We train our staff repeatedly. They are all certified, and they are alerted to these kinds of concerns so that when they're ready when they do open the containers for any eventuality. We try our best to make sure that we are safe about how we operate in the port.
I even challenge you.
And we haven't had, I mean, it's reflected, we don't want accidents. We haven't had too many serious incidents in the port in that regard. We know it's a problem because people do tie up old shells and so on of cars in the containers. And then we have to improvise in terms of how we maneuver. But we're confident in the skills of our staff to handle it.
Okay. A little foggy, but continue. We continue with the honorable member from Christchurch South.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, and good afternoon, Minister, and to your team. I feel constrained, Minister, to commend the fluency with which you speak on your portfolio, and indeed the authority that you appear to bring to the subjects at hand. I myself would not chide the member for Christchurch East for intervening on the matter of Oistins. His intervention really is a demonstration of the artificiality of constituency boundaries. He has a common interest, as I do, in Oistins. He probably knows that several of the fisher folk and several of the boat owners who operate in Oistins are from his constituency, as well as they are from the constituency of the member for Christchurch West Central. And to my left, I am being persuaded that some are from the constituency of Christchurch West. So that we all have a common interest, so that this question of constituency borders disappears on the matter of fishing. He did receive or elicit your response in relation to the boatyard and the hauling of boats out of the ocean, and we are extremely happy at your response, and we are quite willing to defer to the expertise of the technocrats. As you know, Minister, we have met with you several times. We have a very active and activist boat owners community there, and again, I want to say publicly, Minister, I don't mind saying this, that whenever we call, you would come and meet with us. Your only concern was that your dog should be fed first, but but you always responded favorably, and I personally, Minister, want to thank you for that, for those many visits that you've made and the interest that you've shown in your portfolio, and more so in the existence of a healthy fishing community. So that you've answered the question that I had intended to ask as to the machinery for the haulage of boats. As you are aware, and as you may have said, the expense of haulage from Bridgetown to Oistins is a bit great, but apart from that, there's the hazard to which a boat is exposed when it is hauled from Bridgetown up the ABC Highway and down Oistins Hill. There's always the risk of damage to the boat. So I would move from the boatyard and go to those who are less well off within the Oistins community, Minister, and again to publicly express gratitude to you for coming to Oistins and making a promise and keeping the promise. I admit that as parliamentary representative, I was a little nervous when I promised the people there that the fish market would have been upgraded. You're not a minister, I'm not a minister, and I make the promise, and you feel imperiled that that promise may not be kept. From me to you personally, I want to express gratitude. I want to express that gratitude on behalf of the fisher folk who operate in that market. Not only have you installed new counters, but you have brought dignity to the lives of working people, and that is essentially what it is about. I bring you the good news that they're extremely happy today. I bring you the good news that they're extremely happy with you, and as a result, I have been a minor beneficiary in those expressions of gladness. So I had to get that off before I came to the other issue of the jetty. They've been making complaints. You and I have discussed this, and you've given assurances again. If again, Minister, on this point you have glad tidings to bring to us, even at this time of year, please feel free to do so in relation to that jetty. Yes.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member for Christchurch South. I recall when we visited Oistins at the time, it was your passion, I told you this at the time too, your passion for Oistins made it incumbent upon me to do the things that you requested of us as a ministry to be able to do. And the truth of the matter is that Oistins market was in such a state, it was almost shameful that somebody could leave the market at Oistins in the kind of state that it was in. It was really, we found on the countertop there were broken tiles. And if you're serving fish, as you know, if you have these broken tiles with the grout in between, the presence of bacteria must have been overwhelming. The possibility of salmonella, all the cupboard doors were broken off, the runoff, it was just bad. And we've been able to change the countertops. We spent, I think, at last count, we were over about $400,000 in Oistins. In terms of the changing the countertops that we use commercial quartz. In the interim, we're going to use an aluminum, but then they said it would rust in the corners. We use the PVC board to make up the covers. We're doing the staff quarters, but we've done a lot of work at Oistins, but there's still a lot of work to be done at Oistins. And if you look at the estimates, Honorable Member, we have work still in play for Oistins during the course of the year. So we will continue to upgrade Oistins over the next year. One of the things that I said at Oistins, and I say all the time, is that we cannot leave the fish markets in the state that we came and found them, because people have to go to work there every day. And the history of Barbados and our relationship with the sea and our relationship with the fish tells me, at least, that if we care enough about ourselves and where we came from, that we had a responsibility to be able to upgrade some of these markets. And Oistins now requires further work. What I want to do at Oistins is to close it off on evenings, because we know there's some people who use the market for reasons other than trading in fish. And I would like to be able to, so I want to close off the market on evenings. Of course, not on Friday when people want to use Bay Gardens. We also want to be able to fix that jetty. Now, we have a relationship with the BNOC. BNOC has agreed to partner with us to do some of the work on the jetty. And we will be in a position to start that work very soon. In closer discussions with the BNOC, they weren't covering as much of the work as I would have liked. And the Honourable Member with responsibility for energy might be able to speak to them so that they do a little bit more of the work. But we also have some funds that we could put toward the jetty. But I know by the end of the year, the Oistins jetty would also be rectified, at least some of it, because the jetty is almost like the umbilical cord, really, to the market. If the umbilical cord is damaged, then everything else is damaged. So we have a responsibility to fix that jetty. I would like to be in a position, I wish, and I thought I had been in a position originally to say that it would have been fixed entirely by the end of the year. But certainly a lot of the work on that jetty will be done by the end of this calendar year. In relation to the other things that we have to do at Oistins, Honourable Member, you know that I am always willing to talk to you. And as we go forward, as the other issues arise at Oistins, we'll work them out one by one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Yes. Minister, the boardwalk, and I think Dr. Brewster would have made some reference to the boardwalk, and we're extremely excited at the proposal in relation of boardwalks in two areas of the constituency. Certainly the stretch from Christchurch West up to St. Lawrence Gap. That is, for us, a proposal that is very, very exciting. I want to say to you something that Dr. Brewster knows, though, that there's a group of us who met recently, and with some credit to Dr. Brewster, he did inform me of this meeting, and I attended. It's a non-governmental organization of persons who met to discuss beautification of the area stretching from the police station down to that jetty itself, in fact. We have called it a coastal walkway, the beautification of Oistins, not for the fisher folk this time, but for the people who visit Oistins and recreate in Oistins, and indeed the residents of Oistins. So we have had advanced discussions. Their design's actually done, and I'm sure that Dr. Brewster, who is also my constituent, one of the better constituents I have, he can expand on the proposals. You see, Oistins is not, while people live there, it is not only for the people of Oistins, but we welcome all of Barbados to Oistins. I spoke with the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central this morning. I had no idea that he would come here and mislead the House by saying that West Central is the epicenter of Christchurch. I don't know what map he has, but culturally, the whole of Barbados knows that it is Oistins. But if Dr. Brewster wishes to expand on any proposal for the beachfront and that beachhead of Oistins, we are willing to listen with some eagerness. But of course, through you, Minister, please.
Thank you very much, sir. As part and parcel of the additional design work for the Coastal Risk Assessment and Management Program, what we're looking to do in Oistins is we're planning to build the beach area just behind the Bay Gardens and down to the most southerly drain by the fish market, to rehabilitate that space, to slightly widen it, and to also try to deal with the drainage issue where the sand actually goes up and blocks that drain at the southernmost extent of the fish market. The other drain that actually separates the old bus terminal from the area close to where the fishermen like to do their dominoes, etc. That drain is also going to be looked at, and there might be a need to actually consider the redirection of that drain to another location. But the real intent is to try to ensure that the clifftop area that runs along behind the old bus terminal is retained as like an open window for the public to use and enjoy the vista. And then down towards the location out behind the old licensing authority, there's an area out there that we're looking to try to widen the beach along that coastal frontage to allow for more recreational space in the shore area by the small beach to the west of Miami Beach, to have a more widened area for beach recreation along that coastal space as well. So it will be a transformative in terms of the area itself. The intention is to keep the actual frontage open for the public and having some form of walkway, whether it be boardwalk or paved access along there with chairs and benches to allow the view to continue for the public to enjoy, and also have that done before that space could be lost for commercial gain, but to ensure that the residents in the area would then have almost a continuous access along the cliff top from the same Miami Beach all along the frontage down into the Bay Garden in an effective manner. We know that the drains there are the biggest problem because of the blockage with the sand that's happening, and there may be a need for small fluidizers or a mechanism to ensure that they're kept free. But the one especially by the fish market is a concern, because when there's wash down from the fish market, a lot of that water material is retained because of the sand blocking that drain, and it needs to be flushed regularly. So there would be a drainage facility provided through a redefined headland structure that will allow for free flushing of that drain on a regular basis.
My final, Madam Chair, thank you. I could not let this occasion escape unless, Minister, I've paid tribute to you and your willingness to assist the Oistins project. And I could not let the occasion escape unless I also paid tribute to your former PS, Mr. Ezworth Reed. One day he stood up and gave me a lecture as to the concept of the blue economy. So I want to pay tribute to him. I want to say to you that there are times that I do not call you. I call the members of your staff and Mrs. Leslie. I want to pay tribute to her as well. It helps when you've gone to university with somebody and you see them later in life. Mr. Leslie, who is present at all of the meetings when we do the boatyard meetings. Mr. Bernard Steele, I have to pay public tribute to him as a leader in the fisher folk community. And Mr. Willoughby, who's retired, again, it helps when you've gone to university with somebody and you see them later in life and you have easy access to their expertise. I wish him a happy retirement, Minister. And indeed, I wish all of your staff at Maritime Affairs a happy existence under your very easy leadership. So I would come finally then to I'm so happy with all that I've heard here today, Minister. I'm very, very happy about it. So I would come, the worst news that and it's not bad news, but it is an apprehension. There's that vessel that bursts off the coast. I believe it may have something to do with petroleum going to the airport. And I don't know if this is properly for you or for the honorable member for Christchurch East, but we in Oistins, and those who work and recreate in Oistins, want always to be given the assurance that proper safeguards are always in place against pollution by that ubiquitous bolt that is always out there against spillage. We want to be sure that there are safeguards in place. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you, sir. Just in response to that, yes, there is a National Oil Spill Contingency Plan in place for dealing with the management of the aviation fuel. All aspects of oil pollution are managed through the Environmental Protection Department, and Coastal Zone also sits on that subcommittee to deal with the oil spill conditioning and simulations. So we're fully aware of the concerns. As part and parcel of the works even that we're doing or proposing to do for that area, the whole issue of the aviation pipeline, etc., was taken into consideration to ensure that there would be no long-term disturbance to that as well. And we try to ensure that the responsible private sector agency does their routine annual inspections for the pipeline itself and the connectors that the vessel would have to tie up onto and connect for discharge.
Just very quickly, when these estimates are over, Honorable Member, because it's clearly a concern of yours, I suggest that we meet myself, your colleague, Honorable Minister responsible for energy as well, and just have a conversation as well with my team in Coastal Zone. And we'll have a conversation just to allay any fears that you may have, or to strengthen any protocols that we have in place to ensure that the worst does not occur.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As I listen to the discussions, even in relation to spillage, it makes it even more urgent than I thought initially, Minister, for us to establish a working committee, and I use working in a very rigid sense, so we can apply the science in a meaningful way across ministerial borders. I know that we have a number of committees dealing with specific things, but I believe that there's a lot of creative ideas that which we have to apply to modern challenges, probably that never confronted us before. And I feel that there's a necessity for us to have a working committee where the scientists within the different departments can meet on a regular basis and use the intellects in order for us to address a number of issues. And obviously, we need also to include, and I know we have some committees, but I'm talking about working committees. We need to also engage the University of the West Indies to be part and parcel. If we can do that, I think we'll be able to create some new paradigms that will be very relevant to some of the challenges that we are facing. The other point I want to make, I don't even want to put it in a question, I can't. Minister, we work in a very integrated manner on issues related to the coastal areas, the beach, and so on. Sargassum, this nuisance that recently invaded the shores of Barbados and disrupt the lives of fishermen, the tourist industry, and the general environment. I think that we have to come to a quick solution. I know you made a number of proposals, but quite recently we had a regional meeting at the Hilton Hotel. One of the sovereignties in the region indicated that they were experimenting with the sargassum, and they were producing a special block, which is similar to what we use for, we use with cement, a block that can be used for housing development. And I have not seen any of the blocks. I don't know if anyone in here, in the ministries, saw any of the blocks, but I saw pictures of small low-income houses being constructed out of the material of sargassum, and I think is a an experiment that we ought to work in a very meaningful way rather than just talking about it. We'll be able to apply the knowledge which we have to see if this could be of any use, especially to the construction of low-income houses. But obviously I know that constructing low-income houses at this time, we have to take into consideration climate change. But we could benefit from that source of the sargassum seaweed. And if it is possible, I think there's an area that we need to work closely to see what positives we can get out of that. I want to also suggest the concept of fish farming. And I say this because I am at present, through the ministry, working in close collaboration with a NGO body, and that body is carrying out a pilot study in an urban community on the development of shrimp. And they're hoping that they'll be able to, through this pilot study, look to see all the challenges that they're likely to face having to do this inland. I don't know if they use fresh water. I don't know if they use seawater. But the scientists will be able to work along with that group, that NGO, and work along with the Ministry, Maritime Affairs. We can work together, the UE as well, so that we can help those young men to come up with not only looking to see if we can grow them up to the sizes that we consider to be a reasonable size, but we can also look to see if such a project can be fully commercialized and at a profitable level as well. So based on that kind of information, I believe that is a sound justification for why the ministries must work, and we must not run in different strands or silos or anything like that, because I don't strongly believe in the compartmentalization of units of the government in the way in which they run sometimes. The reality, and I am not one of those people that believe that overlapping is a fundamental a bad administrative approach, because I can't see how you're doing anything that relates to life of human beings and you're not going to see overlapping occurring at different intervals. So based on that, I would just like to hear from the minister or from the technical staff, what is their views, what other areas of diversification we can apply the work of the ministries to, and work in a very collaborative, a very integrative approach.
Thank you, Minister. I know, as you said, we work fairly closely together. We share ideas officially and unofficially. And the ministry works very closely with your ministry, too. There are a number of committees that my people sit on, that your people chair, and other way, vice versa, some that we chair that your people sit on. A lot of my staff came out of your ministry, so they actually have natural friendships and relationships, so they're very close. But I think I take your bigger point, which is that we have now to, considering that we work so closely together and that the issues relate both to your ministry and to mine, that we have to work even closer to be able not only to remedy some of the challenges that have presented themselves in the last year, but to maximize some of the opportunities that we perhaps have not properly maximized as well. And so I take the point, Minister, and that we could perhaps have a conversation about just setting a standing committee at the ministerial level, whereby we look at some of these larger policy issues as we try to resolve some of these challenges and maximize some of these opportunities. In relation to the sargassum, no, I have not yet seen the bricks, but I've seen people doing amazing things with sargassum internationally, some in the region, and also some here locally in Barbados. As part of our management plan for sargassum, as you know, in terms of managing it, the amount of it that is on the beaches, NCC takes responsibility now for the ones that are most populated with sargassum, being in the north, the River Bay, mostly on the East Coast as well. Because NCC has the machinery to be able to move the sargassum. When sargassum comes, sometimes sargassum could be 6 feet thick. So when it actually lands, and there's some instances of sargassum being blocks almost as big as a football field. So you have 6 feet thick. So, one, I remember at Concept Bay, we cleared Concept Bay, we moved tons and tons of sargassum. tons and tons. And we did a video of the work we did at Concept Bay. We moved it, we cleared it. And in so doing, we took sugarcane equipment. This is about being innovative, and UNDP has actually captured this. We took sugarcane equipment, we converted it, so we took the sugarcane grabber and used the sugarcane trucks and everything, and we cleared the beach. We did it in conjunction with the Turtle Society so that we didn't damage the turtle nesting sites. And it was a beautiful video. The next morning, if you had gone to Concept Bay, you would have felt that this ministry and the NCC and your minister had done absolutely nothing. The amount of sargassum that came in overnight, again, populating the entire beach. I mean, you could not get in or get out. Sargassum requires, the amount of sargassum that comes requires a plan of action, but it is overwhelming. It is overwhelming every country now that is coming into contact with it. Mexico has been trying to take leadership in relation to how we handle the sargassum seaweed. All of our collective responses, I said, is less than 1% of the sargassum that comes on the shore. So even as we convert the sargassum seaweed into something productive, the amount that comes is so significant that there's still a significant amount of it that becomes a burden to people. And as we know, when sargassum becomes anaerobic, it is almost toxic to smell and to deal with. So, but we have to figure out a way to deal with the sargassum seaweed. Minister, I take your point as well about the innovation. In our management plan for sargassum, we have 2 mobile biotechnology labs. We had them retrofitted, and we're working now. The University of Georgia has asked us to partner with us to be able to outfit these labs, to be able to run different tests on the sargassum to see its usefulness and its application for different things. So very soon we may be in a position to say that we've developed a system to be able to deal with more of the sargassum seaweed than we are currently able to deal with. And I also mentioned that we bought a seaweed harvester for about $150,000 to be able to capture some of the seaweed as it is fresh. There's much more applicability and application and usefulness of seaweed once you capture it fresh and still on, and of course you don't have the burden of having to shake out the sand. So we bought a tractor, we bought the seaweed harvester, which we will unveil very soon. It is a fairly big boat that captures the seaweed on the shore, on the sea. And we bought a conveyor belt to move the seaweed straight from the sea onto the shore. So we're working at different ways to be able to address the sargassum issue. I think all of our collective responses, yourself, mine, and the region as well, we were hoping later this year, with the help of IDB, to be able to host a regional conference on blue economy, of which sargassum would have been a major part of it. COVID-19 now has everybody considering traveling and these conferences, so we will see about that. But I take the point. And the last one, Minister, you raised was in relation to the work that I think that's BJI is doing with the aquaculture and trying to grow the shrimp. And I've actually seen it myself. And what they're doing there is fantastic and transformative. And it's a possibility now of a new, and this is for the opposition leader because he's been asking, I've said about 20, but it's also a new area of, and for young people, so the Minister of Youth would also be interested, to be able to grow on land through aquaculture, fish that would traditionally have been grown in the sea. And once this initiative that BJ is working on is proven to be successful, it's something that we could repeat and replicate in different areas and give other people the opportunity to be able to generate enough revenue to sustain themselves as well, and maybe even do more than sustain themselves. So these are some of the areas that we are working on, but I think the overall point, Minister, is that we must work closer together as we do so. The last thing is the tuna loining that I spoke of, well, in Cabinet yesterday, whereby we are, as it stands now, Barbados does, you catch a tuna, they cut the head and they clean the guts and they send the fish overseas. It's called head and gutting. And once you sell the fish as a whole fish like that, you get less money for the fish. If Barbados is able to cut the fish, the tuna into loins, you could generate millions of dollars more in revenue, millions. It's been proven. And so we are now working with FAO. We just did the study. The study took a few months, and the results only came back a couple of weeks ago. And it will show it's the possibility for us to be able to do loining in Barbados, to generate millions of dollars for the country, but also for the fisher folk directly, because it's really going to be for them. To be able, so what happens is if you take a fish, you cut it into loins, You could sell it and you say this is grade A. Because you've seen what's inside the fish, you know it's grade A. As it stands, sometimes you send a fish whole, it's not cut. And once it goes to the US or the buyer, they look at it and then they say, oh no, this is not grade A, this is grade C. And they give you significantly less. And you can't even argue because you haven't done the necessary things to test the loining. So you,
When
so
you say loins, the steaks?
it steaks.
Okay.
So once you've been able to do that, you could then guarantee a higher price for your merchandise. It means that we have to be able to do some retrofitting of the markets, and we're working to do that. So we're hoping to have that whole transformative thing done within the next year or 2 years as we build out the tuna industry as well in Barbados. So there are a number of things happening, and over the next year or two, you will see a lot of them rolled out.
All done? Honorable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, by its very definition, the blue economy speaks to the potential for economics, use the waters. There are a number of things that are happening around the world, and I'm just wondering if your ministry has been, looking in some of these areas. So, for instance, in tourism, there seems to be a trend now where people are traveling to actually look at and study, in some cases, lighthouses. And we have 3 of them on island. That's 1. 2, there's another trend where people are building underwater museums for divers. And you mentioned earlier about some of your sites which are protected and other things. Is there a possibility for that in the areas? And then a former minister of tourism many years ago spoke about the use of water taxis for transportation. And fourth, but not least of all, is there also a potential for offshore energy producing things such as windmills?
Those are a number of questions. I'm not sure I remember all, but when the ones I forget, Minister, please remind me. The last one in relation to offshore potential for energy, the answer in a word is yes. In fact, the CDB has done a study, and it shows that Barbados could produce enough energy, more than enough energy currently to do Barbados and then some. So the potential is definitely there. I'm sure the Minister of Energy could speak in more detail to that. But I think we use now, like 150 or so. I think the study said we could generate like 450. Just the potential for energy is there. Of course, the infrastructure and the cost and setting it up and so on are other considerations, but that is one of the areas that I believe we could make significant impacts and inroads, and that Barbados could position itself to then send energy to the other islands in the Caribbean. That's one. And in relation to your question on the lighthouse, that question excites me because I think we discussed this before too, but I think we know there are people who travel to see lighthouses. And Barbados still has, in great condition, we have 4 lighthouses, and the one at Hilton is controlled by Hilton, and we control 3. But Barbados now has 4 functional, still in fairly good condition lighthouses. We could make a tour of the lighthouses, starting at Hilton and going all the way up to the north, and stopping at different sites along the way as part of our tourist product, but also as part of the product that we offer to Barbadians. The lighthouses I think we visited the lighthouse, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think we visited the lighthouse, so that we realize that there's potential for opportunity there. And also, once the lighthouses become active, there's then the possibility that the people in the area could also build businesses around the lighthouses, because then it would have people coming to visit the lighthouses.
I had asked about the trend of people building now underwater museums for divers.
I will let the head of coastal deal with that.
Thank you. Yes, Minister, that is a very valid opportunity that could take place. We've already had an application for one tentative structure, as in a statue, to go in a location for the establishment of what they were calling an underwater cultural museum. The issue that we had was the location that they were choosing was within the same Carlisle Bay area where the wrecks were, and that was posing a significant problem for us because of the existing crowding. So finding a new location and then establishing an area to do it would be exactly what you want, because then other persons who are interested in putting down other statues would be able to then use the site, put in the statues, and therefore have a greater diversity for the dive experience especially. And you know, we look forward to those sort of initiatives along the way. That is something that we would fully support.
Thank you.
then
My last one was water taxis, transportation on the water.
So we put out, thank you, Minister. We had put out an EOI for berths and jetties across the island, because as part of the, Leo says part and parcel of the build out of the water taxi would be to have the jetties at different points so people could stop at the various points on the water taxis. We have several people who've expressed interest in helping us flesh this out, the water taxis. We believe there's been some studies done. There are further studies now to be done in terms of the business model of it, but the persons who are making the investment are willing to do those studies. But we know that there is great potential, not only in terms of its convenience to move people, but also in terms of the attractiveness of the whole idea. As part of the gathering, I think the Honorable MP for St. Peter did a water taxi experience, which was extremely successful. So we know that it is of interest to Barbadians. I think I would like to say that within the next year as well, we have now the expressions of interest for the berths and jetties. Once that is finalized, we could move toward the water taxi in more detail. But we've had people submit proposals to do water taxis across Barbados. Some have sent in the different boats that they're now using, the different vessels, to be able to taxi people. I think we have to encourage Barbadians so that when it does come on board, that they recognize that it is a possible avenue to move and to make the experience as pleasant as possible. Some of these new boats look very, very comfortable. So I know people are afraid of getting sick, or some people may be afraid of the actual roughness of the ride. But a lot of that can now be mitigated with some of the newer vessels. So yes, Minister, it is definitely an area that we're going in. I'm hopeful that we will be able to build it out again through partnerships. And I think that's the important thing. A lot of people are saying, how are you going to be able to do all these things? But we're working with partners who are willing to put their money where their mouth is. And therefore, we are able to build out some of these things. But thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. I just want to wish you and your team continued success.
Honorable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I know everybody might be smiling, wanting to know what I know about the coast. But I think that my query is really very important at this time. And I too want to express my gratitude to the Honourable Minister and his team for what I consider to be excellent work being done in the area that he has under his remit. My simple question, in the interest of time, is to find out what are the synergies between or among the Ministry of Agriculture, the Blue Economy, and there's one other ministry that will come, in relation, and the Barbados Water Authority. I know of a time when a friend of mine who lived in St. James called me to say, what is happening in St. Thomas? And I said, we're all dry weather. She said, well, down here it's flooded. The one thing about St. Thomas, they can't keep its water. Now you will appreciate, sir, ma'am, ladies and gentlemen, that runoff water is coming from the heart of Barbados, where there's quite a bit of agriculture, and a lot of farmers are using chemicals, which I believe, in my limited understanding of what is happening, will have some kind of impact on marine life. And I would like to know what kind of arrangements or synergies there are to be able to work to minimize or to eradicate altogether the use of quite a number of chemicals that I see people using, like gramoxone and all the other things that will impact.
Thank you, Minister. And that's a very good question. I think the relationship between the ministries, specifically Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Maritime Affairs, is such that it works both ways, because as I said earlier when I spoke about the silage, we will be able to take fish silage and feed animals. So there's a case whereby you could take, we develop a solution in one area and remedy a problem in another area. And I think that is going to be part and parcel of the way we build out the blue economy in relation to agriculture. But we also meet with the minister fairly often to address some of these issues, bearing in mind that markets previously sat under the Ministry of Agriculture as well. So we also have that natural relationship. In relation to the work we do with the Ministry of Water Resources and Energy, we speak primarily more on energy. I take your point, however, that the situation with the runoff is problematic. There is, it's accepted anywhere, really, that the level of nitrates found in some of the products being used in agriculture is damaging to the environment. I know the minister knows this. We had the conversation about it. But the world is already making strides to reduce the level of nitrates that can be found in a lot of these animal products anyways. So that even as the world makes the recognition that the damage is not only now about what you feed the animal, but it's the consequences of it. And so I know the minister has already talked about bringing a restriction on some of the products that are being used, but we want to do so in a way that is manageable so that even as we ban certain products, we have alternatives for the use of persons in the industry as well. But I feel very strongly that we will not get very far in managing what we're trying to manage in terms of the nearshore management, in terms of our coral, in terms of the quality of the water, if we do not start treating seriously to the runoff and the full watershed management. And, we've spoken already too about being able to capture some of the water even before it gets to the sea and to use it for other purposes. But I think that watershed management conversation is vital. And the nitrates in the water is vital. Managing the nitrates in the water is going to be essential. We've spoken about the number of ways that the Coastal Zone Management Unit and their associates are trying to rebuild coral. Some of the coral has shown the capacity to be able to survive in waters that contain pollutants that they probably should not contain, but we would like to be in a position to manage the level of nitrates in the first place. So I do think that at some point we're going to have another conversation about that. The truth is, though, that because we've been using these products for so long, the quality of the water of the soil in some cases is saturated, and it will take a few years or months at least, but I think years, for the nitrates in some of these things to be, or to use a different plant as we breed and grow plants to be able to use those nitrates. But I do take the point, and I think it's going to be parcel of our blue economy management, because the problem in the nearshore, a lot of it is really the runoff from the land space. It's the land-based pollutants that is really causing a lot of the problems in the nearshore. And we have to manage those. We have to manage the bacteria level that is also in the water. It's also part of the reason we're trying to ban plastics. It's a really comprehensive conversation. But I think we've already started the conversation, Minister, and we are working on reducing it.
My voice is so low. I beg your pardon, ma'am. I forgot. My other query is associated with the port, the Barbados Port Authority. About 3 years ago, I was on top of the hill by Hines Hill to bring you down to the university. And I saw so much flame. I was ready to call the fire service to find out what was happening. And as we proceeded down the hill, we got to find out when we got on Spring Garden that there was the burning of refuse. And you could see the flames and the smoke and so on. I just want to find out, I know we're into harsh economic time, but I also know that a lot of people suffer from asthma. And I also know that the SO has a massive set of tanks with petrol and so on. I want to know what plans do we have for the future to minimize or to eliminate altogether the burning of refuse in that way, so that it makes it better for healthy living and for safety, not only for those in the boats and the ships that would be in the outer harbor, but indeed the residents who are living along the Rihanna Drive and so on and so forth.
Madam Minister, I take the point. I will let the the CEO speak in great detail to what we're doing there. I think you're talking about the black smoke that you see go up in the air. I've seen it. All of us have seen it. So we've had conversations in the port on this, and I think the CEO should be able to report some progress.
Thank you, Minister. As you know, we are signatory to the IMO Convention, MARPOL Annex 5, in which we, as a country, have to have port reception facilities at the port for waste from ships. At the same time, we have a public health concern, and the port health people don't permit garbage to leave the port to go into the country, of course, in order to protect the country from any diseases and so on. So we have to dispose of the garbage at the port, and the way we do so is via incineration. We have an incinerator that's over 25 years old and is very much at its end of life and is not capable of burning all the garbage generated at the port. The port internally generates about 1,500 cubic meters of garbage, and during the cruise season, which is 6 months of the year from November until May, generates a further 22,000 or so cubic meters of garbage. So our incinerator is not capable of dealing with it, and we, unfortunately, is not something that we are proud of at all. We have to sometimes burn via open hearth, as we have to dispose of the garbage and get rid of it. Otherwise, we will have a problem with rodents and so on. To address this matter, we are working with IDB Invest, and we've had a study completed because we were looking at gasification versus pyrolysis versus incineration, and they've come back with a study and indicated that we should continue with incineration, and they're going to provide us with the specs and the help in the procurement of a new incinerator that will handle about 4,500 cubic meters of garbage per month. We also have a term sheet from IDB Invest, and we are in the process of acquiring this incinerator. The order of magnitude of cost for a new incinerator that we're speaking of is $15 million US. So we are not proud of the fact that we burn garbage. We try to minimize that, and it only happens during the season. We do generate quite a bit of the pallets that come out of the containers, the ship's garbage. Remember, we are a home port, and we therefore want to provide those facilities for the ships. We will hopefully, within this financial year coming, we will have that incinerator and eliminate this burning that you see happening periodically. When we do burn, Minister, just for a minute, when we do burn, we involve the fire service and all of the various agencies so that we are satisfied it's relatively safe, but it's not something that we are proud of.
Thank you, Minister. When we inherited the government and we realized the situation with the incinerator, to the extent that you have an incinerator, but that it does not have the capacity to be able to handle the garbage that you know will come to the port, that is almost shameful. And so one of the things that concerned us significantly, and I'm sure it did the chair and the PM and the government, was that there had been so many other deals made in the port, so many other contracts, so many other things signed off upon. But the fundamental things, the basics, like getting an incinerator right, was not viewed as a priority of the last government, but is a priority of this government. And that's why we are not only looking to replace the incinerator, but we are looking at getting the most technologically advanced incinerator that once we start to deal with the garbage, that we do not generate pollutants or damage the environment. So the incinerator that we're looking at is going to be very technologically advanced, but it's going to be keeping with the port's mandate to be green and blue. It will make sure that once we do actually deal with the treat to the garbage, that we do so in a way that is environmentally sensitive as well. But it's a little bit frustrating to see the deals that were made in the contracts and money spent on those other things, and something as important as an incinerator was left undone.
Just wanted to add that the incinerator we're looking at will also have a waste-to-energy component, where we will, with that volume of garbage, we expect to be able to generate enough energy that would take care of 20% of the energy bill of the port.
I remember for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honourable Minister, I too would join others in congratulating you on your stewardship thus far. It is a new ministry. It is one that is perhaps unfamiliar in terms of the language of the blue economy to most Barbadians, but it is one that I know that your heart is in, and that I think has been coming out certainly in a number of your remarks on this area. As Minister of Education, my concern, and certainly I think one that is perhaps we would express in education, is how is the ministry pursuing initiatives in relation to young people and being able to get the younger generation to understand and appreciate the blue economy, what it means to them, and certainly what it means to Barbados. Obviously, they're the next generation that's going to have to take over from us. I know there are some initiatives that are in the school, but I'm just curious in your estimates whether in terms of your research, in terms of your initiatives, whether you have actually prepared and positioned yourself to be able to enter the schools and to do more work within the schools than you presently do.
Thank you, Minister. I also I appreciate your comments about the work you're doing in the blue economy. Of course, you know how I feel about the work you're doing in education. Significant work as well. So the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, the challenge that we have, if I could call it a challenge, is that things that children accept easily, adults do not accept as easily. And if the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy is going to be successful in the long term, then the ambassadors for the ministry must be young people. Must be young people. They get it. And to answer your question directly, I have now visited several primary schools on invitation, private and public, and been invited to see different schools doing different things in the blue economy, some doing so much innovative work. Unknown to me, you know what I mean? I would just get a call and say, could you come and see this work? And so I've visited, I know my team has visited several schools as well. In relation to being able to go out into the schools, one of the things that we accounted for in the ban on plastics was to have young people as ambassadors. And we have to approach the ministry in a serious way about coming through the schools to be able to speak to some of the principals, but also to speak directly to the children to become ambassadors for the ban on plastic at a number of the schools, and to do a small competition in the schools that we're hoping to do this year in relation to the ban on plastics. But most of the work that we're hoping to do, though, Minister, we're hoping to be able to do through our partnerships with other persons. We had, in the estimates, we'd allocated some funds to support other NGOs, and we've been working with the Blue Green Initiative and others. And you would have seen in the newspaper recently, the Blue Green Initiative was at a particular school, I think it was Blackman and Gollop. And the PS was at the meeting as well, where we contributed significantly to that. And through the BGI, we're going to be going to various schools and talking about the blue economy and what it is, and so that we think we can reach people through these partnerships effectively. And we're going to be doing a number of schools over the next year. We've also been working with the UNDP. UNDP has been doing significant work in the blue economy. In fact, while I was here, I got a picture of UNDP at a school. I'm not so sure which one it was. And they're asking the children, what does the blue economy mean to you? And again, getting some innovative responses as well. So we've been working through our partners to be able to do that work. But I think we need to have a more formal arrangement where we come into the ministry and we talk about how we could have it, even in terms of the curriculum, as opposed to being a sideshow, you know, involving it more into the curriculum as we build out the blue economy. I think for the sustainability of it all, not only for the success of the blue economy, but just for us to start thinking about how important it is to really start taking care of the climate is just phenomenally important. But Minister, I take the point, and I hope we get to work even closer over the next year.
All done. You're done? All right, Honorable Minister, you can do your wrap-up now.
I won't take 10 minutes, certainly. Okay. Madam Chair, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present our estimates. I want to thank the Leader of Government Business for the management of the whole affair as well, the Opposition Leader for his questions. I want to thank the Opposition Leader for his questions. I obviously want to thank all the members in this honorable place for their questions and for the thought-provoking ideas as well, as we try to work together to build the blue economy. Naturally, I have a great debt of gratitude to the people who sit beside and behind me, who in many ways do yeoman service for the country, who work beyond the call of duty. I must tell you, I am very, very happy with the team that I have to work with. I think we're going to be able together to do something transformative. I take note of the MP from Christchurch South and my former PS, Mr. P.S. Reid, who is now in the Ministry of Small Business, but I also want to thank him for the work that he did here as well. I think over the next year, 2 years, certainly, as we concretize some of the plans that we've been doing in the last year, Barbadians will come to appreciate in even greater abundance the work that we've been doing. I recall, and I always remember when I was announced as Minister of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy at my constituency office, my entire team of persons going like, what is that? Like, what is this that the Prime Minister has given you? And I think they did not realize then, but they realize now that in a way it has been a gift, but that it is indeed a necessary thing. The staff would tell you that being able to pay attention in greater detail to the issues in fisheries, because fisheries has always been an adjunct to the Ministry of Agriculture, being able to pay greater attention to the work we're doing in markets, being able to pay greater attention to what Coastal Zone has to offer, and treating to the port now as a business and moving toward the future to become the leading port in the region. These are the opportunities that are before us. We're also transforming shipping and making that different. I think in the next year or two, people will come to fully appreciate some of the work that we've been doing. But I just want to take this opportunity again to thank the Prime Minister for the opportunity to lead this ministry. I want to thank my team for the work that they do. And I want to thank the honorable members who sat through my presentation and who really assisted my ability to think about these things with their questions. So thank you very much, ma'am. Sorry. Madam Chair, I move that Head 46 stand part.
Question is that Head 46 in the amount of $15,653,480 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
Question is, I do now report to His Honor the Speaker progress. Yeah. I ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 3:15 p.m.
The question is that this honorable chairman will be suspended until 3:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 3:15 p.m.